Sag Harbor, New York, 2018. Saturday by the Sea. Where I live today, am saltily alive today. A day of beginning, of slow rising, stretching, deep breathing, of reading a morning poem, maybe a Mary Oliver or Ted Kooser, my own form of morning prayer. A day where I look through large windows at the sky and trees, the winter colors, the showing weather. Take the waters, warm and cleansing, over my head and broad shoulders. Invite and allow, out loud, all my possibilities. Wash away unrealities. Dry myself and dress. No socks, though, or shoes. Barefoot's the favored way, to feel the world with fully bared soles. Then the choreography of cappuccino making, the musical expressing and frothing, to sip and savor the comforting creaminess from a bowl, held up in two hands to my grateful lips. This and the sprezzatura dip and moist crunch of golden gran cereale biscuits filling my mouth with Le Matinée of Italy. A day open to passages and images at next or random places of books lying like layer cakes in short, inviting stacks on the kitchen counter, where I sit, back to a long wall of winter sun. There a Russian avant-garde poster. There a recipe for a Basque crochade. Here dispatches from Maine, a pad of longhand notes. Talk with friends, whose voices and faces entered the room from states and countries far away. Drive in my silver chariot down to the ice-flowed bay, to walk along the shore, shorn of summer boats and bathers. Or rove through the refuge, where I greet the day's wild turkeys and white-tailed deer, dark-suited crows, whole regiments of red cardinals, and chickadees that land in my hands for alms of seeds. Crest along the rest of the clear afternoon, musing and creating. Into the dinner hour, when wine is poured, a striped apron added, a good feast for one prepared, and a toast to the day and life and love brightly raised. A song or two maybe, played and heard, or sung with heart to the house, to the eaves and soon eve. Lights turned on when night gathers, when stars and distant planets begin to appear. Clocks later swimming to a quiet stop, still points meeting, theirs and mine. When I slip out of all clothes and cares, into the soft enfolding arms of the bed, the dark, deep sleep and floating dreams, on this Saturday by the sea. Welcome, and thank you for leaning in to the latest floating poetry broadcast, the 45th in my ongoing weekly series, coming to you live by the nourishing sea from Watch Hill, Rhode Island. This is your poet and poetorialist, Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more poetically, more expressively, more soulfully, inviting you, all of you, this week, to explore ways of nurturing yourself, outside and in, more fully, thoughtfully, wholefully. Not only because of the trying times we're experiencing, but also because nurturing your well-being, whole being, on all levels, physical to emotional to spiritual, is so vital. On this theme, I've gathered cultural commentary and contemplations for us of various kinds and poetry, all to help lead us there, in mind, heart, body, and spirit. Tonight, by the way, in addition to my glass of winter water to sip, like now, I have another winter liquid at my elbow, a good bourbon from Wyoming, to toast with later on to a marvelous fellow poet, a large inspiration to me, who just left the planet, but who will live on through his poems and poetic imprint on so many lives and the larger world. So, touching on all different aspects of nurturing. Henry Beston tells us, the writer and naturalist, about a rewarding life that comes from the intelligent integration of being and doing, and true being requiring we re-inhabit our relationship with the living world. He says, work that is done in freedom out of doors, work that is done with the body's and soul's goodwill, work that is an integral part of life and is done with friends. Is there anything so good? There's taking ourselves, our bodies, beings out into nature and stretching our limbs, as he's talking about, in the free, fresh air. And John Muir was obviously a great component. The incredible naturalist John Muir gave us so much. In his Yosemite notebook notes, he says, gain health from lusty, heroic exercise, from free, firm-nerved adventures without anxiety in them, with rhythmic leg motion and runs over boulders requiring quick decision for every step, fording streams, tingling with flesh brushes as we slide down white slopes thatched with close snow-pressed chaparral, half swimming or flying or slipping. All these make good counter-irritants. Then enjoy the utter peace and solemnity of the trees and stars. Find a mysterious presence in 1,000 coy, hiding things. I came across, not a story exactly, but just someone relating their experience on from the Center for Action and Contemplation, Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R's site, on connecting with nature, however simply, and how that can feed us. And this woman wrote to the community, said, I find myself more deeply connected to nature during this pandemic. I pick dandelions, taste honeysuckle, sit by the river and listen to the song of its brown, muddy waters, and then sing a song of my own. I come home from my outdoor wanderings with a heart full of gratitude for this beautiful world that gives and gives and gives. I pray that we will become better caregivers for the earth. If you don't know about Gordon Hempton, he's a man always in search of silence, quote, silence. And he has this beautiful book, 1 Square Inch of Silence. I happen to have that, and I've heard him speak. He did a marvelous interview with Krista Tippett on Being. You could look that up. Gordon Hempton, Hempton. And this is from the beginning of his book, 1 Square Inch of Silence. He says is more than a book. It is a place in the rainforest part of the Olympic National Park, arguably the quietest place in the United States. And he talks further from that point of saying silence is not the absence of something, but the presence of everything. It lives here profoundly at 1 square inch in the whole rainforest. It is the presence of time, undisturbed. It can be felt within the chest. Silence nurtures our nature, our human nature, and lets us know who we are. Left with a more receptive mind and a more attuned ear, we become better listeners not only to nature, but to each other. Silence can be carried like embers from a fire. Silence can be found, and silence can find you. Silence can be lost and also recovered. But silence cannot be imagined, although most people think so. To experience the soul-swelling wonder of silence, you must hear it. Isn't that beautiful? And he just finishes that part of it saying, silence is a sound, many, many sounds. I've heard more than I can count. It is the moonlit song of the coyote signing the air and the answer of its mate. It is the falling whisper of snow that will later melt with an astonishing reggae rhythm so crisp that you will want to dance to it. It is the sound of pollinating winged insects vibrating soft tunes as they defensively dart in and out of the pine boughs to temporarily escape the breeze, a mix of insect hum and pine sigh that will stick with you all day. Silence is the passing flock of chestnut-backed chickadees and red-breasted nuthatches, chirping and fluttering, reminding you of your own curiosity. Well, when I thought about silence, I thought about stillness and how meaningful that can be when we can achieve it, however briefly or wherever we can do that. I'd say daily if possible. And Pico Iyer wrote about Leonard Cohen and the topic of presence and the art of stillness. I came across in brain pickings, and he had a couple of interesting comments about that. We've lost our Sundays, our weekends, our nights off, our holy days, as some would have it. Our bosses, junk mailers, our parents can find us wherever we are, at any time of day or night. More and more of us feel like emergency room physicians, permanently on call, required to heal ourselves, but unable to find the prescription for all the clutter on our desk. It's only by taking myself away from clutter and distraction that I can begin to hear something out of earshot and recall that listening is much more invigorating than giving voice to all the thoughts and prejudices that anyway keep me company 24 hours a day. And it's only by going nowhere, by sitting still or letting my mind relax, that I find that the thoughts that come to me unbidden are far fresher and more imaginative than the ones I consciously seek out. So, thank you, Pico Iyer. There was a fellow, Bill Hayes, and he wrote about REM sleep and the poetics of yawns. And I thought of that because hence the sleeping man image, which is me, but shown on the frontispiece of our program, Your Poet at Rest, because that's resting, sleeping, but even just deep rest is extremely important. And he had some interesting commentary. He said, amazingly, dreaming offers a genuine escape from physical pain, a fact that comforted me in the past and will again, I'm sure, as my partner and I grow older. Even people with chronic severe pain during the day are numb to it in REM sleep. This is the most persuasive argument that dreaming represents a separate biological state, one that can be explosively visual yet is free of physical suffering. It sounds like heaven, and in a way it is. Dreaming led early humans to conceive of a spirit that leaves the body during sleep and travels to fantastic places, which in turn inspired notions of a soul and an afterlife. As it was then, heaven is still widely envisioned as an eternal good dream. So what happens in beyond the dreaming is the waking and the morning. Most of us are waking in the morning. And our wonderful Irish philosopher-poet John O'Donoghue here a sense we might bring to our mornings as we awaken to the day that begins and to shape us and nurture us in its own way, if we allow it to. This is a morning offering. John O'Donoghue, I bless the night that nourished my heart to set the ghosts of longing free into the flow and figure of dream that went to harvest from the dark bread for the hunger no one sees. All that is eternal in me welcomes the wonder of this day, the field of brightness it creates, offering time for each thing to arise and illuminate. I place on the altar of dawn the quiet loyalty of breath, the tent of thought where I shelter, waves of desire I am sure to, and all beauty drawn to the eye. May my mind come alive today to the invisible geography that invites me to new frontiers, to break the dead shell of yesterdays, to risk being disturbed and changed. May I have the courage today to live the life that I would love, to postpone my dream no longer, but do at last what I came here for, and waste my heart on fear no more. Well, imbibing our mornings, especially the light, as I think of it sometimes, just the light itself and the air, the mood. This is a poem of mine. The morning is blushing, with washes of rose over sky blue, over snow-white rooftops, over faces like mine waking to the blushing beauty of the day. Well, whether we're sleeping or not, I know how many of us love our beds. Aren't they wildly comforting? And they're talismans in a way to me. And I wanted to reprise this. There was another program for some reason. I can't remember which one, but I read this piece. But I thought this would be fun to read for tonight and nurturing. This bed can be incredibly nurturing. The Great White Biscuit. Our moniker for the mattress and box spring, the king-sized bed, the often enflowered bower of bliss we call the Great White Biscuit. Our life raft, our spacecraft, our deep sea bed where dreams swim and love is made, where old films play, where cats have curled, where we unfurl ourselves after a long day's journey into night. This bountiful, broad billow of down and foam, the home plate where we slide safe and sound. This comforting and comfortable layer cake for two. This soft and so delicious Great White Biscuit. Well, I'm thinking too of the moon and how lovely that can be for us, feeling of sweetness we can get from that, and gentleness and other feelings. This is the watching winter moon. So, right, the solace we can find in the constancy of nature, of the planets, of the stars, and here the moon. The moon eyes me overtly, peers so brightly, intently, through the bare oak branches, into my room and bed, at my face and hands, shoulders and bare chest, blanket-covered waist, warm legs, studies the open books of Stroud and Rumi poetry waiting to be read before sleep, and the lilting way I take in a few pages of Beauty, O'Donoghue's lyric, Celtic musing, doesn't blink when I return its persistent, insistent gaze. Watches on in white silence, long after my lamp has been switched off, and my eyes have folded into dreams. Well, what about the houses we're in? Well, whether they're apartments or houses, condominiums, whatever, but we'll just call them houses, homes, places, sources of well-being for many of us. And wherever we live, the heart of a house, of a home, can be so nurturing. Yeah, the imprint of energies there, the spirit of the place itself often, especially if it has a longer history. And I thought of Deborah Gottlieb Garrison's poem, Long Weekend at Your House. Strands of wind move through your house like the finest blonde hair, like your hair. The porch that needs painting peels its white skin in the sun. We eat breakfast out here, although it is nearly fall and too cold. You've spent a score of summers slipping out this screen door, which sighs no when opened, yes when closed, out to town, or the sea, alone. The caretaker lives in the potting shed, a fair-skinned man with slender hands. He parks his spindly bike against the gate, paints, fries his breakfast in the kitchen's best iron skillet. Together we envy him. From his garden we pilfer the late tomatoes of August. We bite into them like peaches. But it's September, and you tell me how few men you've loved. Outside you point at the scrubby pine, the path to the cliff, the fading rug of summertime. All this you are heir to. Of course I want to be you. Inside, the brown spikes of books your parents must have read in their stormiest season. At night I sink into their bed and sleep. Thank you, Deborah Garrison. Well, I had read in a previous program a poem called The Flickering, about just firelight. And this is called The Hearth, and because I was thinking about how just a fire, a hearth of any kind you may sit by, tends you, softens and touches you. This is The Hearth. This was written a few years ago. Actually, not that many, 2 years ago. The old oven in the cold night kitchen, whose wide mouth I open to warm my chilled hands as I cook a simple supper, Sip a humble glass of wine. I feel sure, the same kind of comfort others through time, farmers to storytellers, hermits and wayfarers felt around the good fortune of a sheltered fire, and the promise of body-filling food on a deep winter's eve by a welcomely glowing hearth. And on that wavelength of firesides, the comfort of candlelight. This is an ode to candlelight and what it can bring up for us and fill us with. Luz de vela. You who bring such comfort to the darkness, spires of meditation to the stillness, tendering light with simple gracefulness, dancing on tables and faces, bedclothes and bathwaters, enchanting the mind's eye to flicker back through rooms and nights, dinners and gardens, romances, remembrances of other moving, candlelit moments, and glowing on faithfully thousands of years and stories, and many a poet's heart-soft reveries later. O luz de vela. As I thought about homes and houses, I thought about all the animals that we live with, or some of us live with, and that live with us, and we with them, and the nurturing of just their presence, or close presence of our beloved dogs and cats, and what they give us, even just to observe, to behold. And this was for a big white tomcat I had among two cats. One was an Abyssinian. This was the big white tomcat, looked like a big white rabbit, during my New York City married years. His name was Giovanni, and I have two poems for him. Our white tea kettle cat. Our white tea kettle cat purring on a hob of morning sunlight. And say another for that fascinating feline. Many other stories of him I could tell you offline. An upside-down cat cake. I love your upside-downness, the way you sleep, teardrop body at total rest on your cloud of blue mohair blanket, back legs and tail tucked away under your fresh snowfall of fur, paws curled together in pink palmed prayer, and that deep dozing head swiveled around, impossibly upside down, facing the bedroom ceiling and the place where your animal dreams descend. Or Giovanni. So you knew we would be talking about eating and food and cooking and enjoying those things. And here's one from the poet John Keats to his then lady love, Fanny Braun, 1819, wrote her this letter. I should now like to promenade around your gardens, apple tasting, pear tasting, plum judging, apricot nibbling, peach scrunching, nectarine sucking, and melon carving. I have also a great feeling for antiquated cherries full of sugar cracks and a white currant tree kept for company. I admire lolling on a lawn by a water-lilied pond to eat white currants and see goldfish, and go to the fair in the evening, if I'm good. Well, there's an English chef, Nigel Slater, some of you may know. He's written wonderful cookbooks, kitchen diaries. He calls them a series of them and other things. And this was from his Notes from the Larder. And I love this for the feelingness and the, I'll just read it. Marmalade making is about as pleasurable as cooking can get. It isn't something for those who only reason for cooking is the finished product. If the process of peeling oranges, painstakingly cutting their skin into fine strands, and constantly checking their progress on the stove is a chore, then don't do it. There is enough exceptionally good cottage industry marmalade out there. Go and buy it. Making marmalade is a kitchen job to wallow in, to breathe in every bittersweet spray of zest, enjoy the prickle of the fruit's oils on your skin, and fill the house with the scent of orange nectar. Or, of course, screech with pain as the bitter juice gets into your wounds. Each stage, and there are several, carries with it waves of extraordinary pleasure. I say extraordinary because it is not every day you get the chance to fill the house with a lingering smell that starts as bright and clean as orange blossom on a cold winter breeze, and ends a day later with a house that smells as welcoming as warm honey. There's something heartwarmingly generous about marmalade makers. I can't tell you how many jars I have been given over the years. In my experience, they like nothing more than passing their golden pots of happiness on to others. Thank you, Nigel Slater. Well, wine. Some of us love wine. I certainly do. I also did along many decades, or 2.5+ decades, as a winemaker, as an apprentice, when I was married to my amazing father-in-love, Leonardo. And so wine is always a delight, always nurturing, and I came across this from winefolly.com for fellow wine lovers and appreciators. Tasting and savoring wine, the 6 S's. Seeing, look at the color, texture, and body, holding it up to your eyes in the light, how dense, dark light, and its, quote, tears. Scenting, breathe in the aromas, using your nose to taste the vapors. What smell of fruits, flowers, herbs, oak, or other aromas? Sensing, let it rest a moment in your mouth, allowing any more subtle notes to flow in. Try closing your eyes a moment. Swishing, give it a swirl inside your mouth, getting another feeling. How dry, sweet, tannic, tart. Swallowing, slowly bring it into the rest of your body, enjoying its arrival. If you like it, have another sip, another mouthful. And sharing. So, I had some earlier with supper before our program tonight. When you not only give yourself a daily intention, as I do and others do, of let there be ease of way, but also to act on that easing, to take it easier at times when we can, which is more often than we realize. So many lovely things can come about. So here's a poem about that. Sit back. Run yourself a bath. While it's running, pour yourself a drink. A smooth vino rosso or other aperitivo. Put on Coleman Hawkins or Russ Columbo. Have a slow dance with your partner or a slow kiss. Slip out of your clothes into your bath. Sit back. Close your eyes. Let your breath flow, your body float. Your cares and concerns dissolve in the warm and languid waters. Well, after the undressing, how can we find such pleasure? How we can find such pleasure in dressing, in getting dressed, and in what we wear, how we appear in the world, especially to ourselves, and just taking pleasure in our clothes and dressing and wearing things we love is something to do. Certainly something I do, whether it's casual or formal. Here's a poem about that. What does a poet wear? Something Italian, smooth and soft round a plein-air poet's feet, rosettis of brown suede the color of cocoa powder, or a rain-soaked wheat field, with socks of Naples yellow sunning up the calves and ankles. His trousers? Gray herringbone of heavy wool for the winter day, high-waisted and generously pleated, what you might expect of a romantic figure. The chest of his cloud-white shirt contrasts crisply, maybe nautically, with the navy blue of his cardigan, with a collar that unfolds ever so gently over his clavicles, like the resting wings of a dove or butterfly. And last of the poet's dress you find a vintage watch, a gilded square on his slender wrist, where minutes pass, or sometimes suspend, for hours, with a ring of gold on one hand, signifying a bond with a loving muse, and a family crest of fruiting apple tree on the other, with free-flowing roots, and aside its ancient trunk, a floating pair of silk-ribboned roses. This is what the poet wears with pleasure today. Well, we segue a bit, because we're touching on lots of different territories of nurturing. So music sprang into my thoughts about nurturing, and Pablo Casals, who, the great cellist, the Spanish cellist, who lived up to 93, and also he was a conductor, but best known for being a cellist. And he got such creative vitality out of what he did, playing his instrument and music, and he said a couple of lovely things that I thought we'd like to know about. On my last birthday, I was 93 years old. That is not young, of course. In fact, it is older than 90, but age is a relative matter. If you continue to work and to absorb the beauty in the world about you, you find that age does not necessarily mean getting old, at least not in the ordinary sense. I feel many things more intensely than ever before, and for me, life grows more fascinating. The musician Glenn Kurtz, K-U-R-Z, on music and the nurture of that. And he said playing music is the brain's equivalent of a full body workout. Playing an instrument engages practically every area of the brain at once, especially the visual, auditory, and motor cortices. And as in any other workout, disciplined, structured practice in playing music strengthens those brain functions, allowing us to apply that strength to other activities. Playing music has been found to increase the volume and activity in the brain's corpus callosum, the bridge between the two hemispheres, allowing messages to get across the brain faster and through more diverse routes. This may allow musicians to solve problems more effectively and creatively in both academic and social settings. That was very interesting. I didn't actually know that. And then we, of course, have nature as the supreme musician. I find often soother, certainly. It never ceases to touch and fill and relax me and others. This was written in Woodstock, New York, many Aprils ago. Saturday Stream. Cold water rushes over copper rocks. Iced water falls from melting mountain tops, pouring fish and smooth stones downstream to the clear silver swishing sound of cold water washing over copper rocks. So music as meditation, walking as meditation, all these different forms of, quote, meditation, far beyond just sitting in meditation. And mine are mostly in nature and moving about, usually, or still, but it's usually not on a mat in a room. I love to be out and about all the time when I can in nature. And it's very enriching. And the stillness there and the land that communes with us, the landscapes that can commune with us. I was in Santa Fe in New Mexico some years back, and I was sitting out in the mountains, and this poem came to me as I communed, and it communed with me. Apodaca Hill. I followed the dancing ball moon over the rolling waves of red earth, listening to the chorus of crickets, coyotes, and stars, savoring as they sing the scents of pinon and cedar, of sweet juniper cracking in the fire where we sit together in big sky silence, sharing the company of clouds, long, luminous, and still, contemplating us, contemplating them. So I encourage us, each and all, to tune to that music of nature, however subtle or overt it may be, with our outer and inner senses, because it's always sounding and resounding and resonating if we're really listening with our inner ears and seeing with our inner eyes. This is called Everything is Singing, which I believe it is in its way, certainly vibrating, and that's kind of a song. Everything is singing. This morning, the birds, the skyward trees, the sun raying down on the green grasses and flowering gardens, the blue herons, white swans, the old brook and floating pond, this body of beauty, this wide-open, throated heart. So what about reading? Some of us take immense pleasure in reading of all kinds. I certainly do, and know many of you that do. And the Rebecca Solnit, Solnit, in the collection of letters to young readers, it's called A Velocity of Being, she wrote this about reading. Dear readers, nearly every book has the same architecture, cover, spine, pages, but you open them onto worlds and gifts far beyond what paper and ink are. And on the inside, they are every shape and power. Some books are toolkits you take up to fix things, from the most practical to the most mysterious, from your house to your heart, or to make things from cakes to ships. Some books are wings, some are horses that run away with you, some are parties to which you were invited, full of friends, who are there even when you have no friends. In some books you meet one remarkable person, in others a whole group or even a culture. Some books are medicine, bitter but clarifying. Some books are puzzles, mazes, tangles, jungles. Some long books are journeys, and at the end you are not the same person you were at the beginning. Some are handheld lights you can shine on almost anything. Thank you, Rebecca Solnit, for that. So on poetry and society and love, the contemporary philosopher Martha Nussbaum was new to me, but I like what she had to say about this. Speaks of poets, and I felt you'd appreciate her point of view. Poets cleverly hold their intended audience through sufficient rootedness in culture and history. Indeed, it is rather remarkable that figures as radical as Whitman and Tagore should be so widely and intensely loved and accepted. But then they challenge their cultures to be the best they can be, and far better than they have been before. Thus, a kind of political love that has its roots in specific traditions can also be aspirational and even radical. I am he, writes Whitman, who tauntingly compels men, women, nations, crying, leap from your seats and contend for your lives. Both poets suggest by their choices that the problems of their troubled societies need to be confronted in a spirit of love, through works that tap deeply into the roots of people's anxious confrontation with their mortality and finitude. All of the core emotions that sustain a decent society have their roots in or are forms of love, by which I mean intense attachments to things outside the control of our will. Love is what gives respect for humanity its life, making it more than a shell. If love is needed even in a well-ordered society, it is needed all the more urgently in real, imperfect societies that aspire to justice. All right, now I'm picking up this glass of bourbon because I alluded to a poet that just passed away of great note to me and many others. And in honor of him, I'd like to toast him, Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Raise a glass to that great and lasting nurturer who just died at 101 years old. And here's a poem. It's one of the first ones I ever read of his, and it's one of my all-time favorites ever since. And it's very interesting that he passed away and that I'm going to read this particular poem, but you'll understand. Driving a Cardboard Automobile Without a License is the title. Driving a cardboard automobile without a license at the turn of the century, my father ran into my mother on a fun ride at Coney Island, having spied each other eating in a French boarding house nearby, and having decided right there and then that she was right for him entirely, he followed her into the playland of that evening, where the headlong meeting of their ephemeral flesh on wheels hurtled them forever together, and I now in the back seat of their eternity, reaching out to embrace them. A toast to a beautiful soul and poet, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, with some fire water. Well, okay. So, in all of this mix, one of the greatest nurturing forms we all have, is our imaginations, and to open them and spark them and fill them and feed them and touch them and share them. So the imagination, think of that, feel that. Obviously, I imagine many things as a poet. I am often doing my best to translate what I'm experiencing in nature often, but the imagination is part of that too, in dreams. And this poem is, there's a garden behind the moon, lucent, silent, ethereally fragrant, afloat in an untarnished sea of tranquility, aglow with large beds of lunar flowers, whose petals shine and orbit like planets around enchantingly astral pistils and stamens. A garden that grows in starlight, a jardin illuminé. You enter through the swinging gate of your night or daydreams, where you may idle and muse, meditate, and gaze back now and then at the blue-green earth you traveled from, imagined, and back in time as exotically and spaciously bloomed from. There's a garden behind the moon. Well, of the many ways we can nurture our bodies, we must speak of bathing and dancing and lovemaking. You know, the daily bliss of, for me, of a hot shower. What's one of yours? Or other ones than one? The solitude of the shower. In this white-tiled temple, all is pure, all is quiet, save for the sound of clear water falling and cleansing. The light that pours through the window and drawn white curtain is luminous, like the wet skin of my arms and legs, of my open hands and feet, of my glistening face reflected in the mirror on the shelf where fragrant bars of olive and citrus soap rest. In this warm bubble where I can be wholly alone with myself, where it's always safe, always welcoming, always full of solitude. So, yeah. One joyful way of delighting ourselves is dancing with another or solo. I love slow dancing. That's my favorite, and I believe in taking every opportunity to let myself and for you to let yourselves flow to the music, whatever it is. Here's a poem from many marches ago, New York City, 2001 actually. I hadn't seen this poem in a while. After closing, when all the customers have left and all the chairs sit upside down on the tabletops and the ovens in the kitchen have cooled off, 2 chefs, still in their tall white toques, tunics, and long pants, step without words into the small, low-lit dining room, one to sit at the piano by the Dijon-colored wall, the other, as nimble fingers begin to fall on the keys, to take the hand and waist of the last waitress in her white-aproned black dress and dance together after closing. When we come to it from a good place inside, loving with an equally caring, desiring partner can deeply nourish, refresh us greatly. Love making. The making of love, the act and entr'acte of creating something together, newly, entre newly, with the material of body, the immaterial of spirit, the sparking and shaping by the coming together of 2 desiring lovers, all at once and one, of an earthbound, unbound ecstasy, of an experience of rare beauty and rarer harmony, a pathway, however lasting or fleeting, to a free and freeing form of bliss. All right, I'm going to just slip this out because I'm mindful of time, keeping us in a good frame. Friendships and how nurturing those are, yeah? The nurturing nature of them. Annie Lamott, writer. Trappings and charm wear off. Let people see you. They see your upper arms are beautiful, soft, and clean and warm, and then they will see this about their own, some of the time. It's called having friends, choosing each other, getting found, being fished out of the rubble, It blows you away how this wonderful event ever happened. Me in your life, you in mine. 2 parts fit together. This hadn't occurred all that often, but now that it does, it's the wildest experience. It could almost make a believer out of you. Of course, life will randomly go to hell every so often, too. Cold winds arrive and prick you, the rain falls down your necks, darkness comes. But now, there are 2 of you. Holy moly. Well, I often honor my friends directly, casually, and often also in poems, as some of you know from other programs. I've shared some things about different people in my world. And here's one for Ruth Guimara, a beautiful Basque friend. And this was written on her 40th birthday, actually in 2020. It's called 40 Loaves. And yeah, she's a friend, as our friends nurture our hearts. The best ones nurture our hearts in the best ways. 40 Loaves. The miracle of you. From 4 decades of baking. Of you who are ever in the making, in the rising. With the bread of your spirit, your warm heart, your leavened beauty, that daily feeds many, that can, will, as you live forward, as you live and love sunward, feed, fill the senses of multitudes. And there's nurturing ourselves. I know it's not always sunny in our days, our moments, so to speak, and nourishing ourselves when our hearts are heavy or hurting isn't often easy, and it helps to have someone close who understands you and can be a comfort, that friend or partner or another. Sometimes it's a stranger, actually, interestingly. This is a poem I wrote for that. To you of hidden heart, of sad or lonely, longing and deserving heart hidden from view, I hold out a hand to yours. Sense what you cannot say in words or feel easy to show. Offer a gentleness to soften your reticence, a safe harbor for your hiddenness, a place for your heart to enter and freely drop its sometime achingly heavy anchor. Others, maybe you, also find the notion of a guardian angel out there somewhere, or angels, very comforting. And I came across a poem by Rolf Jacobson, actually, I think it is, from Scandinavia. Guardian angel. I am the bird that flutters against your window in the morning, and your closest friend, whom you can never know, blossoms that light up for the blind. I am the glacier shining over the woods, so pale, and heavy voices from the cathedral tower, the thought that suddenly hits you in the middle of the day and makes you feel so fantastically happy. I am the one you have loved for many years. I walk beside you all day and look intently at you and put my mouth against your heart, though you're not aware of it. I am your third arm and your second shadow, the white one, whom you cannot accept and who can never forget you. Offering a prayer to your God, or as I do to the universe, or to the earth, or to the self, is one form of easing that the soul we have, our spirit. Mary Oliver, her poem Praying. It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot or a few small stones. Just pay attention, then patch a few words together, and don't try to make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but the doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak. As we bend look toward, feel toward spring, and that hopefulness that it brings to us, I thought of a dovetail, Galway Canal's poem, Spring Oak. Above the quiet valley and unrippled lake, while woodchucks burrowed new holes and birds sang, and radicals began downward, and shoots committed themselves to the spring and entered with tiny industrious earthquakes, a dry-rooted, winter-twisted oak revealed itself slowly. And one morning, while the valley underneath was still sleeping, it shook itself, and it was all green. Thank you, Galway Canal. You know your poet's love for the sea. It's the place where I feel the most alive. Always have my entire life since I was conscious of it at all. And so the riches of the land have much for us to enrich us, and the endless beauty of the sea for me and others, the ocean. I'm overjoyed to be by it daily. I came across, I've written many poems about the ocean, and I came across in the Metropolitan Museum of Art some years back a painting by John Marin, his watercolor painting, Sunspots from Cape Split, Maine, 1920, and it just brought up so many feelings about the sea, even though it was on a wall in a museum. And this poem came to me then. It's called A Sun-Baubled Sea. Off the coarse point of another time, an unfaded ocean verges out in caps and crests of cobalt, indigo, turquoise, past one small bleach-sailed boat toward a streaking sky where the sun becomes baubles of chrome yellow, rose madder, viridian, and cerulean that float above the watercolor surface, that float inside my watercolored eyes. We're coming into the final stretch now of things, so we might ask ourselves what makes for a good life, certainly a good day. And it doesn't even have to be a good life, it could just be what makes for a good day for you. No two answers will be the same, nor should they be. And I've written a number of different variations of this, and sort of adding, I suppose, onto it at different points. And here's one of my recipes, a good life, it's called. A deep heart, mind, body, spirit, giving and receiving. A glorious partner, grand friends, to share feasts of food, wine, feeling, stories and senses, songs and dances. The joy of being, living, and loving vividly. I love what the poet Jane Kenyon, who's not with us anymore in body, who went through immense physical trials and tribulations that in the end lost her life to, was a true poet nurturer, and this poem is a great favorite. It's happiness. There's just no accounting for happiness, or the way it turns up like a prodigal one who comes back to the dust at your feet, having squandered a fortune far away. And how can you not forgive? You make a feast in honor of what was lost, and take from its place the finest garment, which you saved for an occasion you could not imagine, and you weep night and day to know that you are not abandoned, that happiness saved its most extreme form for you alone. No, happiness is the uncle you never knew about, who flies a single-engine plane onto the grassy landing strip, hitchhikes into town, and inquires at every door until he finds you asleep mid-afternoon, as you so often are during the unmerciful hours of your despair. It comes to the monk in his cell. It comes to the woman sweeping the street with a birch broom, to the child whose mother has passed out from drink. It comes to the lover, to the dog chewing a sock, to the pusher, to the basket maker, and to the clerk stacking cans of carrots in the night. It even comes to the boulder in the perpetual shade of pine barrens, to rain falling on the open sea, to the wineglass weary of holding wine. All right, we're down to the very last pieces for us tonight. I just had one slip of something from Greg Lavoie's fabulous book on callings, his book Callings. And this is called The Way of Passion, this chapter, but just the very beginning. Maurice Sendak, author of Where the Wild Things Are, once recounted that he sent to a young reader a card with a picture of a wild thing on it. And the boy's mother wrote back that her son loved the card so much, he ate it. He didn't seem to care that it was an original Maurice Sendak drawing. He just saw it, he loved it, he ate it. Okay, so Plotinus, on the spirit, the Greek philosopher Plotinus said this: let the body think of the spirit as streaming, pouring, rushing, and shining into it from all sides. And next to last, as we end for now, here's an invocation for you, for us all, as we go along. Ease of way, of self, of life, of every waking, widely awakening, day. And one more. Kiss the earth with your feet, the sky with your eyes, the sea with your ears, your life with your softly parted heart. Thank you, everyone, for listening in and for feeling in, and to those who listen often. Likewise to everyone that contributes to help support these programs and my daily investment of energies in nourishing spirits and uplifting hearts and sparking greater awareness and aliveness through my poetic arts and poetosphere. If you find these programs and efforts worthwhile, feel free to donate by PayPal or Venmo or directly through my site or by regular mail to me at my P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891. I also invite one or more patrons to bring me their way this year for a month or a season as a private working poet in residence on their property. As always, do send along your comments, questions, suggestions. They're always welcome. Email Colin at thepoetorialist.com. Replays are online for all of you to revisit or share around as you like. You can also subscribe in a click to my YouTube channel. Meanwhile, I invite you to lean in next week or soon again. Until then, dear listeners, here's to nurturing all parts of your rare and precious selves. And as always, good spirits.